Hey guys and girls, my name is Alan and welcome to today's new shop episode. So as you can probably tell from the title of the video, today we're going to be covering patch notes 1.06 that EA, well Bioware I suppose, has released for Mass Effect Andromeda. Now, it's very long, so you're forewarned. Maybe get yourself a drink or something, some snacks, settle down. It's going to be quite a lengthy video. I might have to split into two parts. I'll wait and see how it goes, but it's going to be quite a long video, so strap yourselves in. Right, so the patch notes comes in two parts. So you've got the general patch notes for the game as a whole, which covers mostly single player, and then you've got the stuff that I assume you're here for, and that's for multiplayer, and those are called the balance changes. But before we get stuck into the balance changes for multiplayer, I'm going to quickly show you what was talked about in the, just a brief look of what was shown in the notes for single player. So the thing I want to just highlight before we continue, and it's a very line here. Now, the reason why I won't go all the way through these notes is because it does contain some story spoilers. But again, that's probably not why you're here. You're here for the multiplayer stuff, and that's what I'm interested in as well. It's just worth noting that for single player, they've just fixed some bugs and some glitches and that sort of stuff, which is just overall, enhances the performance of the game and your experience of it. So it's all good things as far as I can tell. But I've only glanced through it because, as I said, it contains spoilers for single player. Right, so the line that I want to highlight, and it's this one here. Now, in recent weeks, I guess within the last week or so, it was discovered that single player stats were inadvertently affecting multiplayer stats, and they weren't supposed to be doing this. There's something to do with the wrong file being read or something, blah 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 blah. I'm not completely 100% up to date on what's going on, but they seem to have addressed it. Whether or not they've fixed all the problems, we don't know. It's still too early to say, but they've mentioned it, and according to this, they have addressed it. So that's what I wanted to just point out. And now single player should be separate from multiplayer, as it should have been from the start. Right, so now we can get stuck into the main course, the multiplayer balance changes. Alright, so first off, before I forget, this new update is about 1.5 gig. It's available now. It was available last night. I did install it. I played a couple of silver matches, played 1 or 2 gold games, and I will talk about that when it comes to the relevant section in the patch notes. The game does feel different now. What I will say is a lot of weapons got buffed, a lot of powers got buffed, and because they fixed the issue that was causing single player stats to affect multiplayer stats, things just feel more damaging now in terms of power combos, and enemies have been adjusted slightly as well. And again, I'll talk about that when we get to the section. But the game definitely feels different, and in a good way. It feels a lot faster. It feels like you're actually doing damage to enemies, and they're dying a bit more, appropriately. Whereas before, for example, if you perform a biotic explosion on an enemy and then they'd have half their health left and they'd get back up again and continue fighting, it's like, well, what? This is gold, by the way, that I'm talking about. Yeah, so the game definitely feels differently. And so what I'd advise is, if you haven't been playing for a while, or maybe you just stopped playing, jump back on, give it a go. It does feel inherently different now. And a lot of people have been saying that this is probably what the game should have been like when it first came out. It's not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but it's getting there. I feel like the game at this point might as well have just been delayed for 2 months, because they've done all this stuff, added it on afterwards, and the game would have benefited from having those extra 2 months to be worked on, without having pressure of the public criticizing everything you do, and then just bring it out as it is. As I said, it's not perfect at the moment, but it's definitely a lot better than what it was when it first came out. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to what they continue to do for this game. And of course, I will continue to update you on this channel as well as my other channels when the news comes out. Alright, so blah blah blah. As always, I link these sources in the description below, so if you want to read them yourself directly. These are taken from the Bioware blog, by the way. Haven't changed anything. I'm literally just screen recording it and talking through it as we go along, because it's a very long list and I didn't really fancy writing it all out myself. So it starts off, we received a lot of feedback, blah blah blah. Yeah, of course they received a lot of feedback, inverted commas, more like abuse. Some of it justified, some of it maybe a bit harsh, but that's a topic for another day. Alright, so one of the first things they talk about straight away is that they know that obviously powers and weapons weren't doing as much damage as people expected or wanted. And then they noted the 2 things which people were relying on to get kills, and that was the Vanquisher sniper rifle and melee kits, basically. I'm not a huge fan of melee kits because that's not really how I want to play the game. I mean, yeah, it was effective, but again, it's not really what I want to do. And as good as the Vanquisher sniper rifle was in getting kills, I never really enjoyed using it. I mean, I used it because it did the job, but I didn't really use it because, it was a good weapon, as in I had fun using it, sort of thing. Alright, so that sort of sets the tone for the patch notes, which is good. This is what players have been asking for. Adjustments in power damage and weapon damage, and that's the first 2 things they highlighted, so far so good. And so we go down a little bit further. So following on from the start, they realised that powers weren't doing as much damage as they could have done, so they adjusted those slightly. I mean, I've already mentioned this already. Weapons, again, they do list the ones that they've changed, and we'll get to that in a second. Blah blah blah. You can read all this yourself. It's nothing important. It just means that they've changed it and the reasons for changing it. Yeah, because they were weak. That's why you changed it. Okay, so then they move on to talk about enemy factions. Now, the three factions are Ket, Remnant, and Outlaw. Prior to this patch, Outlaw were the easiest. They have no sync kill units per se. They have the Hydra, but it rarely sync kills unless you're really, really cocky and get up in its face. Remnant don't have any sync kill units. They're a bit like the Geth faction from ME3, and they're sort of average. And then obviously you got the Ket with the BS sync kills from the Ascendant and obviously the Fiend, and so they've just talked about how they've adjusted the difficulties. So they do list the things that they've changed later on in the list, but to give you a summary version, the Ket have been sort of nerfed slightly because obviously they were the most annoying faction to fight. I think they were most annoying because of the sync kills, not because of the other units, but the other units got sort of adjusted slightly. And obviously the Fiend doesn't sync kill as often anymore. And I've noticed this firsthand. The Fiend, it still attacks you, but it doesn't sync kill you as often. I saw a player get swiped but not picked up and eaten, which is probably what normally would have happened. I did, however, still get sync killed by an Ascendant, but that may or may not be because of the laggy lobby that I was in, so I'm not too sure about that, still undecided. Outlaws have definitely been changed quite a lot. The Hydra hits hard now, it really hits hard now, and the sharpshooters are annoying as hell. They got buffed in the previous patch and they got buffed again now, and they are so annoying, and I'll talk about that when we get to it down the list. Remnant faction hasn't been touched. I can foresee that changing in the next patch because they are now, in my opinion, by far the easiest faction to take on. Okay, so this section here talks a bit about the issue that I mentioned earlier about how single player stats were affecting multiplayer stats, and basically there was some weird stuff going on with damage reduction when it comes to armor and also enemy health, as well as power damage generated in multiplayer regarding single player stats. So that's all been fixed apparently. Don't know for sure, but it does seem as though they've managed to nail that on the head, so that's now taken care of. Okay, so moving on to powers, as you can see, quite a generous buff across the board, 25 to 35%. So not only has the baseline been moved up higher, power combos themselves have also, well, they were supposed to increase with difficulty, scale if you will, like they did in ME3. They weren't doing that properly in MEA, so that's now been fixed and damage will scale according to difficulty, which is why powers feel more effective across the board and not just on bronze now. And I've noticed that again firsthand for myself. Passives have been adjusted slightly. Oh, actually that brings me on to another point. Some of the skill trees have been messed up. So you need to be careful when using classes that you've got at level 20, for example. You might want to just double check your skill trees because some of the powers have been flipped, but they haven't reassigned the points. So for example, evolution 4A, 4B, if you had your points in 4A and the powers flipped from 4B to 4A, the points are still in the 4A section. So you just need to double check. It's a bit annoying that the points weren't just refunded to you, because I know that some kits had their points refunded altogether, so you can just start fresh and obviously spec them the way you want to spec them. I think the human sentinels were one that spring to mind. So yeah, just check your skill trees, just make sure everything's okay, because some of them have been flipped and some points may have been refunded, so you may need to reassign them again before you join a battle. I haven't really used barricade much, but apparently now the duration's been increased overall, so it lasts longer, so that's good. The barricade, by the way, is that drop down defense system. Flat cannon damage has been increased slightly. Haven't really used it that much, so I can't say whether it's a good change or a mediocre change. I've never been a huge fan of the turrets, even in ME3. I used it if it was there, but if the character had two other good powers, I would use those primarily over the turret. But now that you can put that 1 point in, that's normally where the 1 point goes, into the turret. So if you use the turret a lot, good. If you don't use the turret a lot, it has got quite a decent amount of changes being put into place with this patch. So maybe give it another try and see how you go. Incinerate base damage has been increased slightly. This, in combination with the changes that I listed earlier about the passives and the power combos, fire explosions do a hell of a lot more damage now, so as I said, a lot more useful. Damage over time has been decreased slightly, but if you're like me, you go for the primary damage and the set up an explosion or something. You never wait for the enemy to burn to death because that just takes way too long. Overload has also been increased. Prior to this patch, it would take about half a shield maybe on gold. I haven't tried it out personally myself, but I think it now strips away shields almost entirely. If you then mix it to form a tech explosion or something, you could be looking at an instant kill as well on gold, so that's good. Flamethrower base damage has been increased slightly, but it's still nowhere near as potent as what it was in ME3, so still not a huge fan of it. Cryo beam, Again, slight increase in damage, but I don't really use it to kill enemies. I use it to either set up explosions or to freeze them to, deal with another target. But increase is good nonetheless. Energy drain, again, the damage has been increased slightly. So again, this is good for explosions and, well, just draining shields in general, right? Shield boost radius has been increased. I did not expect this, but this is a nice little change. I mean, I think 6 meters is okay, but 8 is even better. And they've increased the support score from 10 to 20. So generous. The thing that I find with shield boost is the team never really sticks together because everyone's sort of doing their own thing. So it's good that if the radius increased, then maybe I don't have to. I can just run through the middle of the group and then just hit everyone at the same time, rather than always leaving that one person out, not intentionally, just because they're outside the radius of the boost. I haven't actually unlocked a character with invasion yet, so I can't say how good it is in multiplayer, but in single player it seems to be okay. But they've increased the radius of the infection spread, so again, can't complain with that. Moving on to remnant VI, as you can see, it almost has a whole section to itself. There's that many changes for the remnant VI. Remnant VI is one of the powers attached to the Solarian Architect, which was released in the last patch, and basically it was kind of meh, just like a lot of the other powers, but as you can see, it's got a lot of upgrades today. I did try the Solarian Architect. I wasn't a huge fan, and as I said a little bit earlier, I don't really use turrets that much, and I sort of classify the VI as a turret. The difference being a turret is placed in a location and it stays, whereas the Remnant VI sort of follows you around slowly, very, very slowly. But as you can see from this list in front of you, it has been altered quite a bit. So base health has been improved, health regen has been improved, it does more damage across the board. Some powers, I mean, for example, that missile damage, 90 to 450, that's a pretty big jump. I'm definitely going to give this item a go and see how he fares. And also the way that the VI moves around the map now has been changed as well. That was kind of annoying because it moves slowly, it follows you around but really slowly. And so if you're attacking an enemy on one side of the map and then you decide to relocate to the other side of the map, it'll sort of just plod along, meet you sort of halfway after you're on the way back, sort of thing. And it's just, it wasn't particularly good. So now if it gets stuck or if it takes too long to get to where you are, it'll just teleport, which is good. But again, I don't know how good it is in practice, so we'll have to wait and see. But some fairly significant changes to the VI there, so that's good. Okay, so moving on to biotic powers. Now, I do love my biotic booms, and I was very disappointed that in MEA they didn't really do a lot or kill a lot of enemies quickly on gold. It's worth noting that as well as the changes listed in these notes, I have heard that there have been some stealth changes made behind the scenes as well. So if you don't know what stealth changes, basically they make changes but they don't talk about them officially. Things that I've heard are the cooldown on throw has been reduced slightly. Just stuff like that. So even though it's not all listed in the patch notes, they may have made other changes behind the scenes as well. And I think there are quite a few powers which have had their durations and their cooldowns adjusted slightly, so they should work a bit more efficiently and you'll be able to use them more frequently, which is always good. Pull, don't really use it that much. I don't think I've even used this evolution, or maybe I haven't even got to the point where I can pick this evolution, so I don't know whether it's good or not. But it's damage over time, which, as I said earlier, not a huge fan of. I'd rather kill stuff outright than, wait for it to die of its own accord, if it dies of its own accord. Throw, base damage has been increased slightly, so this should help with biotic explosions doing more damage, and also it hits enemies harder as well. Shockwave damage has been marginally increased, again, good for explosions, and can never go wrong with hitting enemies a bit harder. The cooldown and singularity has been decreased slightly, which is good, because 24 seconds was ridiculously long. 20 seconds is still long, but they've made the recharge time for rank 5 plus 40% now, so potentially you could bring it down to sub 15, closer to 12 seconds, which is a lot more manageable than what it was before. Backlash, don't really use it too much, but they've increased the shield health a bit more, so that's good. Reflection damage has been increased as well, that's good. And they've increased rank 4 and 5, which I'm guessing increases reflection damage or something like that. Biotic charge, haven't really used it too much, but increased base damage, again, good. Nova, increased base damage, good. Annihilation, alright. I was a little bit, I don't know about this, because I love the Asari adept, and this does affect her. So base cooldown penalty goes from 60 to 75, which is, I suppose, manageable. But then radius of annihilation field takes a hit from 50 to 35, which is, that's a big hit in my opinion. It still does the job. I did try her out yesterday, but still hurts. And damage and bonus from different users will now stack on the same target. I don't know if this is a bug or not. I think it's to do with the debuffing. It's like if you had an enemy in your annihilation field and you're already debuffing, another player couldn't use their ability and further debuff, if you know what I mean. So now they should stack with, for example, invasion, which is good. So it should have been from the start. And I wasn't expecting a change to Lance, but apparently now they've added a tiny bit of aim assist, and I can personally vouch for this because I have tried it out. You do notice it slightly when you're throwing it at enemies, not just at long distances, at any range. Aim assist is there regardless, but it does make it so that you do hit more enemies a bit more consistently and a bit more frequently, which is good. I approve of that change. Okay, moving on to some passive abilities. So barrier, which is part of the, I think, the Asari, the final tree, which deals with health and that sort of stuff. As I did point out at the start, the devs have noticed that people have relied on melee builds quite a lot, so they've reduced the effectiveness of melee in this particular skill tree from 20 to 15%, which is a little bit annoying because now that all the other powers have been buffed, I don't think people are going to use melee as much as they would have done, but this makes it so that it's not as effective if they decide to go back to it. So it's kind of giving one hand, take from the other, but I don't think that this needed to be changed, especially when all the other powers and stuff have been buffed. Link, I don't know, I didn't use this, so I can't say if this is good or bad. And cooldown on automatic shield regen from saving barrier has been increased from 10 seconds to every 15 seconds instead. This, again, I did notice when I was using my Asari adept, and it kind of makes a bit of a difference. I mean, getting a shield regen every 10 seconds was great. 15 is manageable. It's a little bit longer. You can sort of notice it. But generally, when you lose shield, you try and get to cover. You don't rely on it to save your life. Though some players did play aggressively in the hopes that saving barrier would save them, which it kind of did in some situations. So it's a shame to see that change, but I'm sure it's something that we can just deal with. Biotic Ascension. I don't know. I'm not a huge fan of this ability, so I can't speak for it. But it's been improved, so can't argue there. Now, this next bit hurts me as well. Character stats. So the Asari Adepts and the Krogan Vanguard both got their base shields nerfed, and I genuinely don't understand why. The Asari Adepts was never particularly tanky to start off with. She's now super squishy. Well, in my opinion anyway. I did play with her yesterday, and I was playing against Outlaws, and she ate a lot of concrete. And I mean a lot of concrete. Granted, I was playing in a laggy lobby, as I said earlier, but it still felt as though I was going down very easily, and maybe that's just me adjusting to the new difficulty, I don't know, but just, I don't know, very squishy. Again, 250 shields is not a lot anyway. To nerf it down to 200 is mad, especially now that the annihilation field has also been reduced in terms of radius, so feels as though I need to play differently with her now, a bit more cautiously, which is not how I want to play her, but unfortunately that's the situation that we're in at the moment. Krogan Vanguard, I don't know, it doesn't make any sense. Krogans are meant to be tanky and nerfing the shields, and to be honest, I didn't really see many people use a Krogan Vanguard, so I'm not sure what the thought process is in terms of this. I can only assume that to do with all the powers being buffed and stuff, and they need to nerf it a little bit, but I don't know, I'm not too sure about that.